What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the wonderful folks at NerdTees. The first recording on my brand new piece of technology, my new cell phone, which I enjoy so very much. And welcome to week 3 of my weekly CFL football pick show for the 2019 CFL season. And folks, the only thing hotter than the tea in my cup was my picks from week 2. Ladies and gents, we went 8-1 across our 9 CFL picks from week 2, and the only one that we got wrong was one of the totals. So damn close to an absolutely perfect week, and what a way that would have been to start off our CFL year. But hey, no complaints about an 8-1 week. We will definitely take it. Has us 13-8 on the season, 61.9%, and that's exactly where we want to be, above that 60% mark across all of our bets on the season. 3-0 straight up takes us to 4-3 straight up. 3-0 against the spread, which I'm very proud of, takes us to 5-2 ATS on the season. We're over 70% against the spread. Let's see if we can keep that up. And our totals were also 4-3, like we are straight up. CFL Fantasy Football had myself an excellent week 2, and as a matter of fact, I now sit in second place out of the 50 people in the Atlantic Schooners official CFL Fantasy Football League. So the fact that I'm sitting in second place, sure, it's only 2 weeks in, but second place feels pretty damn good. Brought in 115.1 fantasy points in week 2, leaves me with 228.3 overall, which again, second place in that league. Very happy about that. My week 2 MVP has to be that Trevor Harris, Greg Ellingson stack as quarterback wide receiver, which I am a huge fan of doing. Trevor Harris, 294 yards, 3 touchdowns. He also had a rushing touchdown. Greg Ellingson brought in 9 catches for 174 yards and 2 touchdowns. Just that stack with those 2 players brought in 68.6 fantasy points. So well over half of my fantasy total just coming from that stack. I'll now give you the opportunity to take a peek at my week 3 CFL fantasy football lineup on your screen right now, and you're gonna notice I didn't go with a defense this week, and it's not very often that I'll do something like that, but all of the matchups this week are trending towards being, fairly high scoring matchups. And I just didn't feel confident, didn't feel super confident about playing a defense this week. So I'm going to, experiment. Week 3 would be the time to do it. Not going to play a defense in week 3. It gave me some more money to go towards my flex position and my wide receivers and my running backs. So it just gives me that extra little bit of flexibility there. We're going to try it out, see how it works for week 3. If it's a total flop, hey, we got tons of time left to make up that ground. Our week 3 schedule in the CFL looks like this. You've got the Edmonton Eskimos traveling to Winnipeg to take on the Blue Bombers. You got to imagine that is the game of the week, and we get it right away tomorrow night. You got Montreal traveling to Hamilton to take on the Ticats. BC is in Calgary to take on the Stamps, and Toronto is in Saskatchewan. Again, both of those teams looking for their first win on the season, taking on the Roughriders. Let's start with that marquee matchup of Edmonton in Winnipeg to take on the Blue Bombers. Edmonton 2-0 on the season, an excellent start for them, especially with all the changeover they had in the offseason. Coming off a 39-23 victory over Mike Riley and the BC Lions last week, an absolutely pummeling display at the line of scrimmage for the Eskimos. 7 quarterback sacks against Mike Riley in that game. Edmonton dictated that game on both sides of the football. It's one thing when you can dictate a game offensively. When you start dictating the game defensively, you're in for a hell of a performance. Trevor Harris, I think, probably has to be my pick for way too early season most outstanding player. I think it's tough to go against him. Just listen to the numbers. Trevor Harris, 57 of 74 passing in 2 games. That's 77%. Holy cow. If you're going to have a quarterback that's going to complete 77% of his passes, good luck taking a loss. He's thrown 6 touchdowns. He's got almost 750 yards passing in just those 2 games. He's got to be my early season call for MOP. You got the usual suspects in CJ Gable and Greg Ellingson really powering the offense, but really in that game last week, it was the 5 players who registered at least one quarterback sack, and there were a couple that had multiple that truly decided this game. Certainly from a morale perspective, because like you're trying, if you're BC, you're trying to climb up from behind. It's really tough to do that when every time you turn around, there's a guy smacking your quarterback. Meanwhile, Winnipeg also off to a good start this season. They've won their only matchup. That was a 33-23 victory also against the BC Lions. This game was in BC back in week 1. A 3-touchdown game from Matt Nichols, and Andrew Harris, 21 touches. That's, I guess, right around where you want. Maybe you want him a couple more. And, ho-hum, he just turned that into 175 total yards. You had 4 Blue Bombers receivers in that game that had at least 4 catches. That was Adams, Harris, Dembski, and then Drew Wolotarski, who turned 2 of his, I believe, 4 catches, turned 2 of those into touchdowns. And those 4 players accounted for 162 of Matt Nichols' 184 passing yards. So sure, it was, obviously the vast majority, but the fact that it was spread out among 4 receivers and spread out relatively evenly, Winnipeg's got a really balanced attack through the air. Special shout out from that game in week 1 to defensive back Jeff Hecht. Had 2 interceptions in that game, which was part of 5 turnovers that the Blue Bombers defense forced on Mike Riley and the BC Lions. They took a few too many penalties. They took 10 in that game for 107. If you cut those penalties a little bit, that was essentially a perfect football game. And that's kind of what I expected out of the Blue Bombers. These guys are going to be a tough out every single week. Like I kind of mentioned off the top, this to me is the clear-cut game of the week. I think this is going to be the closest game, the most hotly contested game. I figure this will come right down to the dying minutes of the 4th quarter. I need to see the Esks do it on the road, if that makes any difference. Like, they've had 2 really good performances this season. Both of them have been in their own building. They haven't played on the road yet. Winnipeg's a tough building to win in. That's a really good team playing in their own barn. So I just have to kind of see the Eskimos do it. I don't necessarily know that they get it done against this really, really, really good Winnipeg team this early in the season. So this is really a coin flip game to me, but I think I got to go with the hometown Bombers. Let's take Winnipeg in this one. Straight up, I'm going to take Winnipeg at home to beat Edmonton. On the line, Winnipeg is favored by a full 5 points, and for as close a game as I think this is going to be, I feel kind of weird taking the favorite here. It seems like a spot where maybe you would hedge your bets at least a little bit and take the points on the underdog side. But you know what? It's less than a touchdown. I can see this game being tied in the late stages, Winnipeg grabbing a go-ahead touchdown. I can absolutely see that in a game like this. So I think I'm actually going to go ahead and take Winnipeg -5 in this one. Let's take the Bombers side -5. Total in the game set at 58 points, and that's going to be a theme as we talk about the totals this week. They're really, really quite high. Vast majority of people that I've talked to about this game or listened to talk about this game, the vast majority of them are on the over because look at what these 2 offenses are capable of doing. I'm actually not going that way. I'm going to go under on this game, and I have a specific reason as to why. In 4 of the last 5 head-to-head matchups between these 2 teams, 4 of the last 5 has gone under this number. Not just under, has gone under this number of 58. And you gotta, you think about that, the last 5 games was basically this exact same Winnipeg team, more or less, and an Edmonton team that had, Mike Riley and Darrell Walker and Duke Williams and had CJ Gable and like these really solid offensive pieces. Plus, these 2 defenses have started the season very well. They're only giving up 24 and 23 points respectively. That's only 47 total. The total in this game is 11 points higher than that. So it might not be the smartest play. It's certainly not the majority play, but I'm actually going to go under on this one. Under 58 points in Winnipeg, Edmonton. It's going to be a bit of a sweat. Let's head to the Hammer now, where the Ticats are going to be playing host to the Montreal Alouettes. Alouettes losing their season opener back in week 1. That was a 32-25 decision in Edmonton. Furious comeback attempt by the Alouettes. It falls just a little bit short with Pipkin suffering his injury and Vernon Adams going in. Damn near led the comeback in that one. The Owls scored 17 of their 25 points in the fourth quarter. They almost completed it, man. They were that close. They flat out, they needed more on defense. And I mean, the fact that they gave up 600 total yards on defense really spoils what was a really good running game. And if you watched my show last season, you'll know that I really played up Montreal's run game because it was really good. And they had another good run game in this one, and spoiled by the fact that they just could not make a stop on defense. Somebody asked me in the comments of last week's video, is there a quarterbacking controversy in Montreal? And I think if Pipkin wouldn't have suffered the injury, yeah, actually, I think there probably would have been a quarterback controversy in Montreal, because when Pipkin left the game, he wasn't playing all that well. And then Vernon Adams came in and actually played really well and really, again, led what was a comeback that just fell that much short. Pipkin's out 4 to 6 weeks with his leg injury. Montreal signed Brandon Bridge simply for depth. This is Vernon Adams' team now. I liked what I saw last week. Let's see if he can do it now against what's a really good defense in Hamilton. Speaking of Hamilton, Ticats have started the season 2-0, coming off of that massive 50-point victory against Toronto in Toronto's home opener. They won that game 64-14. Gross. I mean, that game was a fait accompli before halftime. Like maybe by halftime if I want to be generous. But I mean, the Ticats only faced 2 third downs in the entire second half. So by the time the Argos had come back out for the third quarter, defense had completely given up. Addison scores himself a hat trick with 3 touchdowns. Brandon Banks returning a missed field goal all the way for a touchdown. Both of those guys went over 100 yards receiving. STE, as I like to call him, Sean Thomas Erlington, goes for 109 yards rushing. I mean, it was an offensive clinic. Let's see. Mercer Timmis retired, so I don't have to remember how to say his name properly anymore. Has Luke Tasker lost his job? I mean, he didn't play in this game and they put up 64 points. I mean, that's a joke, but it's like, what else do you talk about in a game that they won by 50 points? There is a crazy, neurotic gambling storyline in your brain that says, well, Hamilton just shot everything they had on offense, and now like they're in line for a down game. And there is that storyline that's kind of going on in the back of my brain. I mean, it's impossible for me to bet in this spot against what is easily the best team in the East Division, especially in a really comfortable spot playing a not great road team at home. So in saying that, I will say Hamilton gets the win at home over the Alouettes. That's the way we're going here. The Ticats are favored by 13 points in this football game. Hamilton minus 13 at home. And I think you have to take that. The last 6 times that Hamilton has beaten Montreal in all situations, the last 6 times that Hamilton's done that, 5 of those 6, they've covered this number. They've beaten them by at least 13 points. So this is not a spot where I can say Montreal plus 13. It worked out last week. I don't think it's going to work out again this week. Total in this game is also 58 points. And again, it's hard to take the under on a team that just scored 64 against a bad defense last week. I'm kind of coming back around on the concept of Montreal being a good defense. I think Montreal will be a good defense when they show me that they're a good defense. I don't think that happens this week. So we're going to go over 58 points in Hamilton, Montreal. Hamilton to win straight up, and we're hammering Hamilton against the spread. Before we move on to our next game, I will take the opportunity, as I always do, to plug my incredible friends, my incredible sponsors at NerdTees. NerdTees.ca. Hit that promo code BWFinest. That is going to save you 15% at checkout. You're going to get free shipping in Canada on any order over $75. Or if you live in the US of A, 2 clicks of a button, all of a sudden all the prices are in US dollars, and you get an excellent conversion rate on the US dollar. The blend that I am currently drinking is probably my favorite blend that comes from NerdTees. It's watermelon oolong, and yes, it is a cup of tea that smells like watermelon, tastes like watermelon, and hot or cold is absolutely spectacular. Once again, nerdtees.ca, promo code BWFinest, get those savings, get that free shipping, get that great conversion, find yourself something to love, or find someone you love something to love. You can do it on nerdtease.ca. Let's go to Calgary now, where the Stampeders are going to play host to Mike Riley and the BC Lions. It's hard for me to just say BC Lions, by the way. It feels like it has to be Mike Riley and the BC Lions, because from the first couple of games, it doesn't really look like they have too much besides Mike Riley. Well, they got Burnham. Lions are 0-2 to start the season, coming off that 39-23 defeat in Edmonton to the Eskimos. And again, they got points on the first 4 possessions. That was good. BC had a really good start in that game. And it feels like it was just an adrenaline dump. Like, they had a good start, and then after that, they did absolutely nothing. It died after about 20 minutes. Mike Riley's return, obviously a painful one coming back to Edmonton. 7 sacks against. He was hit a bunch that were not registered for sacks. He barely threw over 50%, 149 yards, and only had a 1-1 touchdown to interception. It was not a good football game. Let's put it that way. The BC Lions in this game kind of committed to the run, certainly in relative terms versus the game in week 1. They had 15 carries last week versus the 4 carries they had in week 1. Now they just got to work on the effectiveness a little bit, because those 15 carries only generated 53 yards. Stampeders 0-1 to start off the season, coming off that 32-28 loss against the Ottawa REDBLACKS in Calgary. And again, I said it last week, I tweeted it. That was the worst Stampeders game and worst Stampeders team that I think I've ever seen. Bo Levi Mitchell throws under 60% in that football game. Also just had that 1-1 touchdown to interception ratio. Calgary had no run game to speak of, despite the fact they got Don friggin' Jackson back there who can run the football. No run game to speak of. They allowed Bo Levi Mitchell to be sacked 3 times, gave up 400 yards of offense on defense. They turned the ball over 5 times, the most un-Stampeders-like Stampeders game that I have ever witnessed. I do have to take the time to shout out the one Stampeders player that actually acted like he wanted to play a football game in week 1. That was defensive back Trey Robertson, basically the only one who showed up. Had 4 tackles in that game, had 3 interceptions in the secondary. I'm expecting a bounce back here because, good Lord, how could you not? I've touched on it a little bit this season, and it kind of carries over from what I felt about him last season. Mike Riley, to me, is not a great road quarterback. He's a great quarterback. Obviously, he's a great quarterback, but take him away from his home building, not so much. The results really aren't there. And if Calgary comes into this game and they aren't pissed off by the way they performed in week 1, I'll be absolutely shocked. Can't sit here and bet against a pissed off Stampeders team. We're definitely going to be on Calgary here at home, going to be taking the Stampeders over the BC Lions. Calgary's favored by 10.5 points here at home. The Lions plus 10.5 is a really popular pick that I'm seeing amongst the bettors on Twitter. It's just very difficult for me to think a team that's giving up 36 points a game right now, because that's what the BC Lions are giving up so far in this young season, 36 points a game on defense. Tough for me to say that they're going to cover that number, even double digits, against the Stampeders. Against another team, sure, that number's too big. But against the Stamps and an angry Stamps team, that's really difficult for me to take. So I think I'm going to be on the home team here again. I think we're going to hammer the favorites for a second straight game. We're going to go Calgary minus 10.5 points. Total in the game set at 53. I do think this one goes over as I did the previous game. 53, it's a low 50. It's approaching a mid 50, but these are two offenses that obviously can score their points. Again, Calgary, I think they have a good game. BC's defense, the offense can certainly do something. So let's go over 53 points in Calgary, BC. And the last game we're going to look at is the Toronto Argos traveling to Saskatchewan to take on the 0-2 Roughriders. Argos, of course, coming off that aforementioned 50-point embarrassment in their first game of the season against Hamilton last week. League worst defense from last season, and I am calling that defense worse than Montreal's for a plethora of reasons. But the league worst defense from last year opens 2019 with an absolute wet fart. They gave up 600 yards against, they allowed 64 points. I kind of question not only the defense, obviously, but now I also kind of question what are the Argos doing offensively. And it's not just about the number of points. It's about the fact that they pulled James Franklin. Like, that game wasn't James Franklin's fault. What the hell did you want James Franklin to do? Get out there in the secondary and try to play defense? James Franklin threw over 60% in that game, which is not the only indicator, but I mean, he threw over 60%. He was through for 211 yards. Yeah, he had one interception, but he was not having the bad game. It was definitely not his fault that the Argos were getting curb stomped. He got benched for McLeod Bethel-Thompson, who came in and really, I didn't think did any better. In fact, I thought he did markedly worse. Look, this Argos defense, it is what it is. This is what we said in the preseason. This is what this Argos defense is going to be. They're not going to be 64 points against per game, but this is what this defense is. It's bad. It's not going to get good. The offense has a lot of weapons, but James Wilder Jr. is still the engine that runs this machine, such as it is. He only had 9 touches in this game. James Wilder Jr. needs the football. And he needs the football a lot. He needs to be touching the football as much as Andrew Harris is touching the football. He needs to be touching the football as much as CJ Gable is touching the football. And if he's not, it's going to be a long season, Argos fans. I hate to break it to you. The Saskatchewan Roughriders are probably the best 0-2 football team in this league. I would say they're better than BC, and I don't think anybody else is 0-2. But 0-2 is not reflective of the quality, I think, of the team. They've just lost 2, pretty competitive football games. Last week, they lost to the Ottawa REDBLACKS 44-41 in what was another, furious comeback attempt that just fell a little bit short. Cody Fajardo goes the distance in this football game. I thought we would see some Isaac Harker in this game. We did not. He plays the full game, throws for 360 yards, and throws 3 touchdowns, including a rushing touchdown. He definitely proved his worth last week, and they just couldn't quite come back. One of the reasons they couldn't come back is defensive back Nick Marshall, who had 5 tackles in this game, was really not bad, but he had absolutely no idea how to stop Dominique Rhymes. Dominique Rhymes consistently in that game beat him downfield for big gains, beat him for a touchdown, I believe. If he gets one stop there, one stop could have been the difference in this football game in what was eventually a 3-point game. Stop him one time, and that could have been the difference. And that's how close Saski is to being a good team, potentially even 2-0, despite the injury to Collaros. Shaquille Evans and Kyron Moore combined in this game for 12 catches, 220 yards receiving. A couple of really great games for them in the receiving game. Evans also found the end zone for a touchdown. They had 3 rushing touchdowns as a team, but they did take 10 penalties for 110 penalty yards, and they turned the ball over twice, which resulted in 11 Ottawa REDBLACK points, and that's the difference. So there's good and there's bad with this team, but they are, despite the fact that they're 0-2, they're this close. And quite frankly, when you're this close against the Toronto Argos, you're going to win the football game. Pepperidge Farm remembers that the Argos have not won a game on the road since November 2017. Obviously, we're on Saski in this one. Let's take the Roughriders at home. A big win over the Toronto Argos. That's what I'm feeling this week. Saski favored by 11.5 points in this game, and I've seen a lot of Toronto plus 11.5 in this spot as well. This is another one where I think Saskatchewan covers it because they're a better team than most of the numbers indicate, and I do truly deep down believe that, and I believe this is also Saski's home opener. So I think this is going to be an utter curb stomping. We're going to take Saskatchewan, hammering them minus 11.5 against the spread. Total in the game set at 53.5 points. I think it goes over because how the hell can you trust Toronto's defense to not allow a game to go over? I think Toronto's going to be an over machine until they actually get their first win of the season, and then it might slow down a little bit. But until that point, I think the defense has absolutely no idea what they're doing. All right, folks, that is it. Those are your week 3 picks in the CFL. We're going to go over them here with you one more time. I've got Winnipeg at home over the Edmonton Eskimos. We're going to hammer Winnipeg minus 5 against the spread. We've got Hamilton at home to pick up a win over the Montreal Alouettes. We are also going to hammer Hamilton minus 13 against the spread in a game that goes over 58 points. We've got Calgary at home picking up their first win of the year over the BC Lions. We're going to hammer Calgary minus 10.5 at home in a game that goes over 53. And in the final game, which I believe takes place on Monday, Happy Canada Day, Saskatchewan at home over the Toronto Argos. We're going to hammer Saskatchewan minus 11.5 against the spread in a game that goes over 53.5 points. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for me. Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at Nerd Tees. Enjoy week 3 in the CFL. Happy Canada Day coming up in just a couple of days. Enjoy the football. We will see you again more promptly, hopefully next week, for week 4.